There are two kinds of wars in this world: those fought with weapons, and those fought within the soul. On the quiet morning of September 11, 1906, inside a crowded hall in Johannesburg, South Africa, a young lawyer named Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi rose to speak. His voice was soft, but his words carried the weight of centuries. That day he asked his people not to strike back, but to stand still. Not to hate, but to endure. The British Empire ruled over 1/5 of the earth. He ruled nothing, except his own conscience. And yet, with nothing but truth and silence, he would bring the greatest empire of his time to its knees. They mocked him. They jailed him. They called him naive, even mad. But Gandhi believed that the mightiest revolution does not roar, it whispers. That freedom, if it is to be real, must first be born in the heart. So tonight, as the world quiets and your thoughts begin to drift, let us travel through the dust and dawn of a century, to follow the man who turned peace into power, and silence into the sound of a nation awakening. This is the bedtime biography of Mahatma Gandhi, the man who fought without a sword, and changed the world forever. Chapter 1. The Quiet Beginning, 1869, Porbandar, India. On the morning of October 2, 1869, the small coastal town of Porbandar, nestled along the Arabian Sea in western Gujarat, India, awoke under a pale golden sky. The wind carried the smell of salt and incense, and the waves brushed softly against the stone walls of the harbor. It was on this quiet day that Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi was born, a child who would one day awaken the sleeping conscience of the world. His father, Karamchand Gandhi, served as the Dewan chief minister of Porbandar state, while his mother, Putlabai, was a woman of deep faith and calm discipline. She prayed before dawn, fasting often, whispering her devotion to Lord Vishnu. From her, young Mohandas learned the rhythm of silence, the strength of restraint, and the peace that comes from within. As a boy, Gandhi was shy, almost invisible in crowds. He spoke softly, preferred books to games, and avoided conflict even when teased by others. Yet, within that silence grew a seed of courage, the kind that does not roar but endures. In 1876, when he was 7, the Gandhi family moved to Rajkot, another princely state in Gujarat. The air there was dry and full of dust. The streets echoed with the calls of merchants and the clang of temple bells. Gandhi attended Alfred High School, where he struggled with English and arithmetic, but excelled in honesty. His teachers often noted that he could not lie, even when lying would have saved him punishment. In May 1883, at just 13 years old, Gandhi was married to Kasturba Mukherjee, a girl his own age. The ceremony took place under oil lamps and chanting priests, a ritual common in India's customs then. Gandhi would later reflect on this child marriage with regret, saying that he was too young to understand what marriage meant. Yet Kasturba, patient and steadfast, would become his lifelong companion, walking beside him through imprisonment, exile, and revolution. When his father fell ill in 1885, Gandhi spent long nights at his bedside, fanning him, whispering prayers. It was during one such night that his father passed away. The room was lit only by a flickering oil lamp. Outside, a monsoon storm rolled through the sky, and the scent of wet earth filled the air. Gandhi would later remember that silence, the silence of loss, as the moment he first learned the fragility of life. 2 years later, in 1887, he completed his matriculation in Ahmedabad, and a few months after, he set sail from Bombay, now Mumbai, to London on September 4, 1888. The ship trembled against the grey waters of the Arabian Sea as India's coast faded into mist. He was only 18, dressed in a simple white suit, holding a small copy of the Bhagavad Gita and his mother's blessings. London in 1888 was a world of contrasts. Horse-drawn carriages rattled down cobbled streets, gas lamps glowed through the fog, and the air smelled of coal and rain. Gandhi rented a modest room at 20 Barons Court Road in West Kensington, and began his studies at the Inner Temple, one of the city's 4 law colleges. He struggled at first, with food, with speech, with loneliness. Vegetarianism, which he had promised his mother to maintain, made him an outsider in the dining halls. So, he found his refuge in a small bookshop on Fleet Street, where he discovered Henry Salt's A Plea for Vegetarianism, 1886. It was this moment, simple and quiet, that changed him. For the first time, Gandhi saw that his Indian way of life could be a philosophy, not a burden. As winter deepened over London in 1889, Gandhi would often walk along the Thames River, watching the moon ripple across the water. The city lights shimmered like stars fallen into the mist. He wrote in his diary, "Silence has a sound, the sound of the soul remembering its truth." By June 1891, after 3 years of study, Gandhi was called to the Bar of England and Wales. He had learned law, but something deeper too, that truth and discipline were not just virtues but ways of living. On July 6, 1891, he boarded a ship back to India. As he stood on deck, the cold wind brushing his face, he whispered a silent vow, to serve, not rule. And so began the quiet journey of a man who would one day shake an empire, not with weapons but with peace. As the sea stretched endlessly before him, the stars above flickered like the lamps of destiny. Chapter 2: The Awakening in South Africa, 1893 to 1914. The story of Gandhi's awakening begins not in India, but thousands of miles away, beneath the cold skies of South Africa. On the evening of April 13, 1893, a young Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, now 23, stepped off the steamship SS Safari onto the bustling docks of Durban in the natal colony. The air smelled of sea salt and coal smoke. Horse carriages rattled over the cobblestones and English voices echoed through the port, loud, confident, imperial. Gandhi carried a small briefcase, a bundle of papers, and a single purpose: to serve as a legal advisor for Dada Abdullah and Company, a Muslim merchant firm based in Pretoria. At first he felt proud, dressed neatly in a dark suit, tie and turban, a barrister from London. But the empire he had admired soon revealed its face. On June 7, 1893, as the evening train from Durban to Pretoria halted at Pietermaritzburg station, Gandhi entered the first-class compartment, holding a valid ticket. A white passenger objected to sharing the carriage with a man of color. The conductor ordered Gandhi to move to the van compartment. When he refused, citing his right as a paying customer, 2 policemen dragged him out. The cold night air bit into his skin. His luggage was thrown after him and the train pulled away into the darkness. He spent that night shivering on the platform bench, humiliated, silent, staring at the dim gas lamps and the fog gathering over the tracks. Later he wrote, "That was the turning point of my life. My active nonviolence began that very moment." From that night forward, Gandhi stopped being a mere lawyer. He began to awaken as a reformer. Over the next months, Gandhi traveled across Natal and the Transvaal, witnessing the injustice faced by thousands of Indian laborers, men forced to carry passes, denied property rights, and beaten without trial. In September 1894, he founded the Natal Indian Congress (NIC) in Durban, a small group that met by candlelight in a merchant's warehouse. Their aim: to defend the rights of the Indian community through petitions, legal protests, and the power of truth. By 1896, Gandhi returned briefly to Rajkot, India to bring his family, Kasturba and their sons Harilal and Manilal, to South Africa. But when his ship, the Kurland, arrived at Durban Harbor on January 13, 1897, a violent European mob, furious over his activism, surrounded the port. They attacked him with stones and fists. Gandhi was rescued by Superintendent Alexander, who hid him in his home until the crowd dispersed. Instead of seeking revenge, Gandhi publicly forgave his attackers, saying, "Hate the sin, not the sinner." In the quiet aftermath of that attack, Gandhi's philosophy deepened. He began to fast regularly, read the Bhagavad Gita, and study the Bible and Leo Tolstoy's "The Kingdom of God is Within You," 1894. From these words, he drew the seed of satyagraha, the force of truth born from love and nonviolence. In 1903, Gandhi moved to Johannesburg, where he opened a modest law office at 15 Rissick Street. The wooden floors creaked under the footsteps of clients, tailors, traders, and laborers, all seeking justice in a system designed to silence them. By 1906, the Transvaal government, under General Jan Smuts, passed a law requiring every Indian male to register and carry identification at all times. The Asiatic Registration Act, enacted on August 22, 1906. On September 11, 1906, in the Empire Theatre, Johannesburg, Gandhi called a public meeting. Over 3,000 Indians gathered under the flickering gas lamps. The air was thick with tension and hope. Gandhi spoke calmly, his voice steady. "We shall not obey this law. But we shall not raise our hands in anger. Our weapon will be truth itself." That night, the movement of Satyagraha was born. In the years that followed, 1907 to 1913, Gandhi was imprisoned 3 times. The first arrest came on January 10, 1908, at Volksrust Prison, where he served 2 months for civil disobedience. When he was released, he met General Smuts in Pretoria on February 28, 1908, offering to end the protests if the law was repealed. Smuts promised reform, but broke his word. So Gandhi resumed resistance. On November 6, 1913, leading over 2,000 Indian miners, including women and children, Gandhi began the Great March from Newcastle, Natal, to Tolstoy Farm near Johannesburg. The sun burned over the red earth. Barefoot men walked silently, singing hymns of peace. British police arrested Gandhi at Charlestown on November 10, but the marchers continued without him, their faith unbroken. By June 1914, under international pressure and negotiation with General Smuts, the Indian Relief Act was passed, abolishing the hated poll tax and recognizing Indian marriages. When Gandhi left South Africa on July 18, 1914, boarding the ship SS Kinfon's Castle, the port of Durban shimmered under the setting sun. The air was warm, the horizon endless. Behind him lay 21 years of struggle. Ahead, the heart of a nation yet to awaken. He wrote in his journal that night, "The test of truth is not in victory but in endurance. South Africa gave me that truth." As the ship drifted into the Indian Ocean, the waves whispered of home, of a land waiting to rise softly through the power of peace. ChatGPT said, Chapter 3, The Return to India, 1915 to 1919, The Seeds of a Revolution. The ship SS Kinfon's Castle reached the shores of Bombay, now Mumbai, on the misty morning of January 9, 1915, a Saturday. The city was waking slowly, its harbor full of seagulls and sails, the scent of salt and spice drifting through the air. As Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi stepped ashore after 21 years abroad, he was greeted not with drums or banners, but with silence, a reverent silence that spoke of expectation. Standing beside him was Kasturba Gandhi, her white sari fluttering softly in the sea breeze. Together they were welcomed by Gopal Krishna Gokhale, the wise and gentle leader of the Indian National Congress, who had long awaited Gandhi's return. Gokhale, frail but radiant with purpose, placed a hand on Gandhi's shoulder and said, "India has need of you now more than ever." It was Sunday, February 14, 1915, when Gandhi visited Pune, now Pune, to meet Gokhale again, a meeting that would shape his understanding of India's struggle. Gokhale urged him to travel the land, to listen before leading. "See India with your own eyes," he said, "and her voice will guide your truth." For the next year, Gandhi did exactly that. Between 1915 and 1916, he traveled from Calcutta to Madras, from Kolkata's crowded markets to the quiet fields of Champaran. The trains rattled through villages wrapped in dust and song, past the scent of mango orchards and the hum of spinning wheels. Gandhi observed poverty that pierced the soul, farmers bound by debt, laborers beaten into silence, women carrying water farther than hope itself. In May 1915, he founded the Satyagraha Ashram on the banks of the Sabarmati River in Ahmedabad, Gujarat. The air there smelled of neem and rain, the evenings echoing with quiet prayer. Men and women spun cotton by lantern light, lived simply, and practiced truth and nonviolence as daily discipline. Gandhi said to his followers, "This ashram is not a retreat. It is the seed of India's awakening." Then came January 1917, when a letter arrived from Raj Kumar Shukla, a humble farmer from Champaran, a district in Bihar. His words trembled with desperation. Peasants were forced by British landlords to grow indigo under the cruel Tinkathia system, leaving them starving. Gandhi agreed to visit. On April 10, 1917, he reached Motihari, riding in a bullock cart through flooded fields. The villagers gathered under the banyan trees, their faces lined with sun and hunger. On April 16, 1917, the British magistrate of Motihari, W.B. Haycock, summoned Gandhi and ordered him to leave the district immediately. Gandhi refused, writing in his calm hand, "I am here to serve those who suffer. My life is theirs, my duty here." For this defiance he was tried on April 18, 1917. The small courtroom was packed. Peasants crowded outside under a blazing sun. When the judge asked if he wished to plead guilty, Gandhi said softly, "I am guilty of obeying my conscience." The crowd erupted, not in anger but in reverence. The British magistrate, moved by the calm of the accused, suspended the sentence. It was the first victory of Satyagraha on Indian soil. Soon after, Gandhi was called to Ahmedabad, where the textile workers' strike of March 1918 had begun. Led by Gandhi and Ansuya Sarabai, thousands of laborers demanded fair wages from the mill owners. Gandhi fasted in solidarity, beginning on March 15, 1918, breaking his fast only after the owners agreed to arbitration. The same year, in June 1918, he was invited to Kheda, a district in Gujarat, where crops had failed and famine haunted every home. The British still demanded tax. Gandhi urged the farmers to stand firm. Even if one farmer pays, the struggle is lost. Truth must stand together. By June 1918, the Kheda Satyagraha succeeded. The British agreed to suspend taxes for that year. But the joy was brief. On February 19, 1919, the British government passed the Rowlatt Act, allowing imprisonment without trial. Gandhi called it a black law, a betrayal of justice. On March 23, 1919, he wrote in Young India, "If the law becomes the weapon of tyranny, the soul of man must resist it." He announced a nationwide Hartal strike for April 6, 1919, a day of fasting and prayer. Across cities, Bombay, Delhi, Calcutta, shops closed and streets fell silent. Hindus and Muslims stood shoulder to shoulder, united in peaceful defiance. But in Amritsar, Punjab, the air grew heavy with tragedy. On April 13, 1919, a Sunday afternoon, thousands gathered at Jallianwala Bagh to protest peacefully. The garden's brick walls trapped their voices and their fate. Brigadier General Reginald Dyer marched in with 50 soldiers and ordered them to open fire. The bullets rained for 10 minutes, leaving over 379 dead and more than 1,000 wounded. The ground ran dark beneath the setting sun. When Gandhi received the news in Ahmedabad on April 15, 1919, he sat in silence for hours. That night he wrote in his diary, "A nation's heart has been pierced. But perhaps this pain will awaken our soul." He called off further protests, saying that India must first learn discipline in nonviolence, that freedom without peace would be another chain. By the close of 1919, Gandhi's name had become a whisper across the villages of India. A whisper of faith, of unity, of a revolution unlike any before it. And as the monsoon clouds gathered over the Sabarmati ashram that year, he looked at the river and murmured. Chapter 4, The Fire and the Salt, 1920 to 1930, The March Toward Freedom. The new decade dawned quietly over India. It was January 1920, and the air in Sabarmati Ashram, Ahmedabad, carried the scent of wet earth and burning oil lamps. Gandhi, now 50 years old, sat cross-legged on a simple mat, writing by lamplight. The memory of Jallianwala Bagh, April 13, 1919, still haunted him. The cries, the gunfire, the silence that followed. He knew then that India's fight could no longer be a whisper. It must become a movement, but a movement of peace. On August 1, 1920, Gandhi launched the non-cooperation movement, urging Indians to reject British schools, courts, and titles. "Let every spinning wheel become our sword," he wrote in Young India. That same week in Calcutta, now Kolkata, crowds filled the streets. Men and women burned foreign cloth in bonfires that flickered like stars of resistance. Across villages, the hum of the charkha, the spinning wheel, became the rhythm of a nation awakening. Gandhi's message was clear: no violence, no hatred, only self-rule through truth and sacrifice. Leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru, Vallabhbhai Patel, Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, and C. Rajagopalachari gathered under his banner. The old and the young, the rich and the poor, all called him Bapu, Father. But on February 5, 1922, in the small village of Chauri Chaura, near Gorakhpur, Uttar Pradesh, the calm shattered. A peaceful protest turned violent when police fired upon the crowd. In rage, protesters set fire to the police station, killing 22 policemen. The news reached Gandhi at Sabarmati on February 7, 1922. He was heartbroken. That night, under the pale light of the moon, he wrote in his journal, "God has been dethroned in Chauri Chaura. I must stop this movement." On February 12, 1922, he called off the non-cooperation movement, an act that shocked his followers. Days later, on March 10, 1922, the British arrested him in Ahmedabad, charging him with sedition for his writings in Young India. He was sentenced to 6 years imprisonment by Judge C. N. Broomfield. Gandhi smiled as the verdict was read, saying, "I am here to obey the law of conscience, not of empire." He served over 2 years in Yerwada Central Prison, Pune, before being released on February 5, 1924, due to illness. Inside the prison, he spun cotton daily, prayed, and read the Bhagavad Gita in silence. The guards often found him writing letters to the viceroy, ending each one with the words, "May truth be our only judge." When Gandhi stepped out of prison, India was changing. The Hindu-Muslim unity he had worked for was fracturing after the fall of the Khilafat movement in 1924. On September 15, 1924, in Delhi, he began a 21-day fast to appeal for harmony. Crowds gathered outside his room each evening, holding candles, whispering prayers for peace. By 1925, he withdrew from active politics, focusing instead on rebuilding villages, teaching spinning, sanitation, and equality. "Freedom," he said, "must begin in the hands, not in the speeches." But the call of destiny returned. On December 31, 1929, at the Lahore session of the Indian National Congress, under the leadership of Jawaharlal Nehru, the tricolor flag of India was raised for the first time at midnight. The river Ravi glowed in the starlight as the flag fluttered against the cold wind. The Congress declared Purna Swaraj, complete independence, and set January 26, 1930 as the first Independence Day. Gandhi watched from afar, silent, contemplative, knowing the time for another great act of truth was near. That act came in the form of salt, simple, sacred, and forbidden. The British monopoly on salt taxed even the poorest, making every grain a symbol of oppression. On March 2, 1930, Gandhi wrote a final letter to Viceroy Lord Irwin, politely demanding repeal of the salt tax. Receiving no reply, he decided to act. Before dawn on March 12, 1930, Gandhi stepped out of Sabarmati Ashram barefoot, holding a wooden staff. Beside him walked 78 volunteers, farmers, teachers, students, their white khadi garments glowing in the early light. They began the Salt March, a journey of 240 miles, 385 kilometers, toward the coastal village of Dandi. For 24 days they walked through the heart of India, through Nadiad, Anand, Surat and Navsari, greeted by thousands who lined the dusty roads with garlands and song. The spinning wheel became their flag, discipline their prayer. Gandhi walked in silence, steady and calm, his eyes fixed on the horizon. At dawn on April 6, 1930, he reached Dandi Beach. The sea lay before him, vast and glimmering under the sun. Kneeling at the edge of the waves, he dipped his hand into the wet sand, lifted a handful of salt and held it high. "With this," he said softly, "I shake the foundations of the British Empire." The moment rippled across India. From Karachi to Kolkata, people began making their own salt, breaking the law peacefully. Tens of thousands were arrested. Among them were Sarojini Naidu, C. Rajagopalachari, and soon Gandhi himself, taken in the night of May 5, 1930, and imprisoned once more in Yerwada jail. Even from his cell, his words flowed like rivers beyond bars. The spirit of man cannot be taxed. The British believed the march had ended. In truth, it had just begun. Across the land, the wind carried a whisper, from the salt pans of Dandi to the plains of Bengal, that freedom could no longer be chained. And as the monsoon clouds gathered again over the ashram that year, the Sabarmati flowed softly, as if echoing the footsteps of a man whose peace had become a nation's fire. Chapter 5. The Final Pilgrimage, 1931 to 1948, From Empire to Eternity. It was the evening of January 4, 1931, when the sun sank low over Yerwada Central Prison in Pune. The air was still, the bars glowed orange in the dying light, and Mahatma Gandhi, now 61, sat in quiet prayer. The Salt March had shaken the world, and though his body was frail, his spirit burned brighter than ever. Outside the prison walls, India had changed. The whisper of freedom had turned into a song. On March 5, 1931, Gandhi met Lord Irwin, the Viceroy of India, at the Viceroy's house in Delhi. Two men, one dressed in khadi, the other in silk, sat face to face beneath the chandeliers of empire. The result was the Gandhi-Irwin Pact, signed that same evening. The agreement released political prisoners and allowed Indians to make salt freely. In return, Gandhi agreed to suspend civil disobedience and attend the Second Round Table Conference in London. On August 29, 1931, he sailed from Bombay aboard the SS Rajputana, wrapped in a simple shawl, carrying his spinning wheel and hope. London that autumn was drenched in mist and rain. At King's Cross Station, reporters swarmed around him, flashing cameras and questions. Gandhi smiled softly and said, "I am a poor man, come to plead for the rights of the poorest." During the conference at St. James's Palace, held from September 7 to December 1, 1931, Gandhi stood alone as the sole representative of the Indian National Congress. Surrounded by princes, politicians, and imperial ministers, he spoke not with anger but with grace. "The British have not taken India. They hold her by the fear they have sown in our hearts. Remove the fear and the empire will fade like the mist. Yet the talks failed. Britain would not yield. Gandhi returned to India on December 28, 1931, and was arrested once again in January 1932, along with thousands of followers. Inside the Yerwada prison, he began a fast unto death on September 20, 1932, protesting the British plan to separate India's depressed classes, Dalits, from the rest of Hindu society. For 6 days he refused food or water. On September 26, 1932, after intense negotiation led by Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, the Pune Pact was signed, granting Dalits political representation within a united Hindu electorate. The nation rejoiced. Gandhi had turned his suffering into strength once more. By 1934 he withdrew temporarily from the Indian National Congress, devoting himself to rural reform, spinning, sanitation, and women's empowerment. He traveled tirelessly from Verda to Madurai, teaching villagers that self-reliance was freedom's first breath. The soul of India, he said, lives not in her cities but in her villages. Then came the storm of World War II, 1939 to 1945. When Britain dragged India into war without consent, Gandhi called it a crime against freedom. On August 8, 1942 in Bombay under the starlit sky of Gawalia Tank Maidan, he rose before a sea of faces and spoke the words that would echo through time. Do or die. We shall either free India or die in the attempt. It was the birth of the Quit India movement. Within 24 hours, Gandhi and the entire Congress leadership, including Jawaharlal Nehru, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, and Maulana Abul Kalam Azad, were arrested. Gandhi was confined once more in the Aga Khan Palace, Pune, from August 9, 1942, to May 6, 1944. There tragedy struck. Kasturba Gandhi, his beloved companion for 62 years, passed away on February 22, 1944, at 7:35 p.m., in the quiet of the palace room. Gandhi held her hand until her final breath. Outside the rain began to fall. He whispered only one word, Ba. The ashes of her funeral pyre drifted with the wind, as Gandhi sat motionless, his spinning wheel beside him, the silence of loss echoing through stone halls. When the war ended in 1945, Britain was weary and India was unstoppable. After Lord Mountbatten arrived as the last viceroy in March 1947, negotiations for independence accelerated. On August 15, 1947, at midnight, Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru stood in Delhi's Parliament House and declared, "At the stroke of the midnight hour, when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom." Fireworks lit the sky. Bells rang across temples and mosques. The tricolor flag rose above the Red Fort, and a nation was reborn. But Gandhi was not there to celebrate. On that day he was in Calcutta, now Kolkata, walking through the narrow lanes of riot-torn neighborhoods, trying to stop Hindu and Muslim bloodshed with his own hands. He said softly to the people around him, "What kind of freedom is this if my brothers kill one another?" Through fasting and prayer, he brought peace to the city. Even Lord Mountbatten would later call it the miracle of Calcutta. But hatred still lingered in the air. On January 12, 1948, in Delhi, Gandhi began his final fast for communal harmony. By January 18th, Hindu and Muslim leaders came to him, pledging peace. He ended his fast with a sip of orange juice, smiling faintly. The country breathed again, but only for a moment. 10 days later, on Friday, January 30th, 1948, the sun set gently over Birla House, New Delhi. At 5:12 p.m., Gandhi walked slowly across the garden, supported by his grandnieces Abba and Manu, to attend his evening prayer meeting. The air was golden, the wind cool, the crowd quiet. As he reached the platform, a man stepped forward, Nathuram Godse, a Hindu extremist. He bowed slightly, then raised his pistol. 3 shots rang out. Gandhi's body fell, his hands folded in prayer. His last words were whispered through the air. He ran, "O God." It was Friday, January 30th, 1948, and with that final breath, the light of truth flickered, but did not die. On January 31st, 1948, millions gathered by the Yamuna River in Delhi for the cremation. The morning sky was pale blue, and the air carried the scent of sandalwood smoke. The flames rose high, and across the world, people stood in silence. From London to New York, bells tolled. Albert Einstein wrote soon after, "Generations to come will scarcely believe that such a one as this ever walked upon this earth in flesh and blood." And so, Gandhi's body returned to the dust, but his truth remained. The truth that peace is stronger than any empire, that silence can shake the world. The river flowed softly beside the pyre, and the wind carried his words still. My life is my message. If this story touched something deep within you, pause for a moment, and listen. What would you have done if truth demanded your peace? Would you have walked barefoot through storms? Or bowed before the comfort of silence? Tell us what your heart whispers in the comments below. And if you believe that history is not just what happened, but what still lives within us, then join our journey. Subscribe to Global Mysteries, where every night we unearth the souls who dared to change the world. Because when we look back at their courage, we begin to awaken our own. Candle, the truth never dies, it only waits to be found.